Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Only Podcast post-game edition. We're coming to you live right after MSU's, I don't even remember what the final score was, 62-58 win over Oklahoma in the Sweet 16 to advance to the Elite Eight, where they will play Louisville at 2:20 p.m. on Sunday. It's a game Spartans trailed early, faced a pair of 10-point deficits in the first half, slowly kept cutting into that lead, eventually got the lead about halfway through the second half, and after a little back and forth, held on to it. Free throws were ugly as usual, but as has been the case in this tournament, they've been making the free throws in the final minute when they count. I'm joined here by Joe Toohey, managing editor of The Only Colors. I know it's late, Joe, but certainly a game that will keep you awake for a little bit. First off, your just initial reactions on the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's surreal, right? I think we knew that this team had a good chance to win this game in particular, but to go from BubbleCon 3 to Elite 8 in 2 months is surreal, and like apparently I'm usually a little more animated during basketball games, and my friends who I was watching the game with tonight said that I was more subdued. And I don't know if it's just because like I can't really process what's happening, or
is it because it's 12:30 at night right now?
Could also have something to do with it. But yeah, I'm confused, I would say is the right status, but excited, obviously.
You know, when you look at this game, it was one that people kind of thought would be a track meet, and we said before the game a key was going to be transition. Both teams like to run, and right off the bat, Oklahoma. They ran, and they got out to a quick 18-8 lead, making 8 of their first 11 shots. But then for the rest of the game, they were, let me see, do the math here. They were 12 for 44 after that 18-8 start, which comes out to 27%. So once MSU stopped the transition and made them play half court, that was pretty much it for Oklahoma's offense. But this is an Oklahoma team that relied on its defense all year, and MSU did struggle at times on offense. Only finished at 38% for the game, but it was a really slow start. They started out 1 for 9 from 3, and they went 8 for 18, I think, the rest of the way. So they it was a game. MSU never really got that big run that we've seen recently, where they start to pull away a little bit. It was a game that I think 5 points might have been MSU's biggest lead in the game. Ended up with 4 points. Your thought on how the game played out compared to maybe what you were expecting?
Yeah, I thought the interesting thing was that there was a lot more hero ball played by MSU than I expected. Right there, at half, both teams had just 4 assists. MSU ended up with just 9 assists on 22 made field goals, which is a lower rate of assists per field goals made than average, and then also 42 of the 62 points were scored by Trice and Denzel Valentine, so that sort of bears that out too. What's interesting is that this team seems to be sort of beating other teams at their own games, whether
Right.
that's Virginia and team play, or Oklahoma and sort of hero ball stuff. Really kind of amazing that was able to happen. The other interesting thing to me was the lack of rebounding by Dawson in the second half. So, I mean, he had 9 boards at the half. He only had 2 rebounds in the second half, and actually MSU was out-rebounded in terms of percentages by Oklahoma, and actually in terms of pure rebounds as well. That's surprising to me as well. I thought that Oklahoma is not a particularly phenomenal rebounding team on either side of the ball.
No.
So it seemed obvious to me in the second half where Dawson was clearly leaving his man often to Sean Thomas to try to sort of affect shots that other Oklahoma dudes were putting up, and that was leading to some pretty easy offensive rebounds for Thomas and for Spangler. But other than that, I mean, those things were odd. No, none of the shooting percentages look good from the MSU perspective, but they look even worse for Oklahoma. Just 5 turnovers in this game, which was hugely helpful, including, I mean, only 4 after the initial possession, where the ball sort of just got stolen and was a turnover for touchdown, as Izzo would probably call it. Yeah, I think the lack of rebounding the hero ball is sort of the stuff that stood out to me.
Yeah, and you mentioned the rebounding. It's been an issue all throughout this tournament when, maybe it shouldn't have, whether it was against Georgia, Virginia, giving up offensive rebounds, and Oklahoma here. It's just, it hasn't been clicking. And when you look, we'll get into Louisville, we'll talk a little bit about Louisville in a minute, but when you look at Louisville, that's a big team, and that's a team that would seemingly be able to get a lot of rebounds against this MSU team, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, it was, I'm trying to think of MSU transition points. I can think of a Forbes 3. I can think of a Valentine 3 when the Oklahoma guy tried to draw a charge. Other than that, it wasn't much anything. This was a game that was pretty much directly in the half court. And in the second half, it looked like MSU wasn't even trying to get in transition because they wanted to send their guards back to get the defensive rebounds because they weren't able to do it otherwise. So I forgot to mention at the beginning, but anybody listening to this, if you're in the comment section on TOC, feel free to ask us any questions. Say if any of our comments you think are dumb or whatever. Kind of make this interactive a bit. Be More Spartan asked, do you think Uncle Vern can learn to pronounce our names by Sunday? Other than Wallenham, I thought he got most of them. But it was a weird setup. The audio setup, I don't know what it is, if it's always like that. I don't think it's always like that in the Carrier Dome, but you could barely hear the crowd. You could hear when the ball would hit the rim with the mics around the basket, and then you could hear Vern Lundquist talking, and that was it. You could barely hear the crowd, so it kind of felt like Vern was talking to himself, so every single thing he said was magnified. And yeah, he said Wallenham quite a bit, which with where Vern is in his career, messing up names is kind of happens a lot. It happened quite a bit throughout the year. It's just kind of where he is. Did you catch that at all?
Yeah, I think I saw a tweet very briefly that had a pig wearing like a wool sweater, which was a woolen ham, which was pretty good. But other than that, I don't know. Unless it's Dickie V, it's hard for me to get too upset about sort of a relatively senile announcer. But I was personally yelling onions on a number of occasions, which I think helped my own viewing experience since Raftery couldn't be there.
Yeah, that was kind of disappointing that they split them up. EL's Finest asked, how big was Matt Costello? He had an interesting game. Finished with only 2 points on the dunk, 3 rebounds. He did miss his 2 free throws. But he did play pretty good defense. 4 fouls. I don't know. I guess I thought Schilling, of the two, I thought Schilling actually had a really good game. Was scored, I think, what did he finish with? 8 points, 4 for 5 from the field. Gave up a couple. Didn't have a single defensive rebound. Actually, looking at this, between Costello and Schilling, there are 0 defensive rebounds between the two of them.
And Wallenman, who played.
And that was evident. They struggled the defensive rebound, but Schilling on the offensive end was good.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
What do you think of the bigs?
I thought they were passable. I thought that Costello's defensive strategy against Tashawn Thomas was a little questionable at times. It looked like he was just kind of trying to take the charge. When Tashawn Thomas was when he was putting some of those shots up, they were relatively forced. I don't know. I mean, I thought Schilling was pretty decent. The rebounding stuff is a concern, but they sort of got what they needed out of those guys, and the fouls. You'd rather have the fouls go on the bigs than on guys like Trice and Valentine, who had a combined 1 foul. So.
Right. I was actually surprised they didn't get a little bit more physical on the outside. Instead, guys were getting in there and getting rebounds and getting fouled on that. Yeah, it seems like Costello and Schilling are just kind of destined to always have 2 fouls by halftime. I thought Witless Chum mentioned this. I was thinking too. Schilling had a dunk early on, a pretty big dunk, and I think that was huge for his confidence. He has really been kind of up and down with his confidence, and if he gets a couple good things going for him, it translates. It carries over pretty well.
And it does feel like he gets called for some stuff that other guys don't. Even other guys on the MSU team, like certain touch fouls, it does seem like he must have like developed a reputation or something. But
I don't know
stuff
what
that,
it is.
right, like Costello, I don't feel like is any less physical than Schilling is, but he just doesn't get called for the same stuff. So I don't know what it is, but I would like to take some credit for in my preview saying that I thought MSU should slow the game down, and that would have some positive effects. And according to Tim Connor, TOC alum, and contributor sometimes still, there was a 55 possession game, which is a very, very slow game. Average possession numbers are in the mid 60s, and so MSU was able to score at 1.13 points per possession, which is very efficient, and the defense was actually not the best at 1.05 points per possession. But I like to take some credit. They actually slowed the game down, and that worked out for them.
Yeah, good note here from KJ on Twitter. No Spartan turned the ball over more than once. Only 5 turnovers together as a team. And Oklahoma's not great at forcing turnovers, but you mentioned the assist numbers weren't great. But the turnover numbers were down, and this team has generally been pretty good at that, but that was huge. And one of those was Nairn on the opening possession that led to a layup. Now, let's talk about Nairn for a minute. He did not play much. He only took one shot. He started the game, had a bad pass, really badly missed a shot, and then Izzo sat him. And TBS noted he was sick during the week. I don't know if I saw that reported anywhere. Maybe it was. But he was sick. He seemed to be doing too much. And MSU basically played most of this game without him. And while his offensive numbers aren't necessarily great in terms of scoring, his assist to turnover has been good on the year, and he brings good defense. And to basically do that without him, I think was big. It'll be interesting to see what sort of shape he's in for the for the Louisville game. You got to figure he's pretty rested. See if he gets over whatever sickness he has. What did you think of Nairn? He was kind of a focus coming into this, having been a teammate of Buddy Hield. I forgot how to say it still. Buddy Hield. They were childhood friends, and they were messed up a couple times, but not much, but not much from Nairn.
Yeah, I thought, I thought that he basically didn't play very much into the strategy for the game, right? I think it made sense to me that if the strategy was going to be sort of putting the ball in Travis and Denzel's hands and sort of expecting them to create in a half-court setting, that Tum-Tum's usefulness offensively was a little limited, and especially in a slow game. I think he'll be significantly more important against Louisville, just as having additional ball handlers will be really important, and also the pace I assume will be up one way or another against Louisville because of their press. So
right.
That'll that's. To me, it seems like it was just sort of a matchup thing. I think he'll be much more important against Louisville on Sunday.
And we've been this far without even talking about MSU's MVP, and that would be Travis Trice, 24 points, 7 for 14 shooting, 4 for 9 from deep, and a perfect 6 for 6 on the free throw line. 2 assists, 1 turnover. Just so many big shots. Sometimes he takes some ill-advised shots, but given the big ones that he does make, I think MSU will live with that, whether it's a step-back 3, whether it's that turnaround fadeaway to put him up 5 late. He is really carrying this team. And I mentioned before the game, a year ago, I was in the locker room at Madison Square Garden after they had lost to UConn, and Trice was just in tears. And other than Keith Appling, Trice was the second most distraught player. And he was saying, that he felt like the team let the seniors down by not getting them to that Final Four and that Final Four streak ending. I think Trice, Izzo kind of brushed it off, the Final Four streak ending, saying, it was going to end eventually. Appling was upset his career was over. But Trice really took that Final Four streak ending hard. He said that when he was getting recruited, he was told he was going to go to a Final Four. And I wonder if he thought that was their best chance a year ago. But here they are, one game away from getting back to it at the same position they were a year ago. your thoughts on just Trice's game and just kind of how he's been carrying this team right now?
Yeah, I mean, what I will say is that just without looking at the stats, before looking at the stats, I just sort of assumed that his shooting percentages were worse than they were because it seemed like he had been taking sort of a lot of bad shots. But as it turns out, I mean, he shot quite well. 4 for 9 from 3, 50% from the field overall, and no misses from the free throw line. It was actually Denzel Valentine who shot a little bit worse. And I thought he was taking sort of better shots for most of the game too.
It did.
But he also, Trice just does things every game where I go, I've never seen him do this before, right? There was a really interesting finish that he had at the rim where he was coming at it from the left side of the rim and he finished with his right hand.
That was a really good move.
I had never seen him do that before.
And you think about when he was like a freshman or sophomore, he only got a handful of 2-point buckets, and he was a disaster by the rim. And you look at how he's grown and how much even in this year, throughout the year his confidence has grown around the hoop, whether it's taking it to the hoop, whether it's pulling up. Just
that turnaround move that he had, which was a huge shot at the end of the game, where I actually audibly said, "Oh no," when he decided to take that shot, and I mean it was pure. He created the space, and I mean he's obviously a good shooter. It's a good shot actually, but again, it's another move I've never seen him even attempt to make, and I am astounded at his growth and his ability to just sort of completely take over games. I mean, Oklahoma has no shortage of athletes on that team, and Trice was just clearly the best player on the floor, it seemed like to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing, and I don't know what to do with that yet. It's still surreal, this team being in the Elite Eight. Even if you told me basically at any point during this year that was going to happen, it's just amazing, and the leaps that guys had to make in order for this to happen.
Right.
Amazing.
I mean, Trice had good efficiency numbers last year, but he didn't play much. He came off the bench, and usually, when the usage goes up, the efficiency goes down, and it certainly has not this year with Trice. And it's the quintessential example of your seniors leading you, and that's exactly what he is doing, carrying them. EL's finest notes looked like a big MSU crowd beside Magic. Can anyone verify? From what I read, it sounded like it was much more MSU fans than Oklahoma, as you would expect, but even a sizable amount of MSU fans there, maybe than you would expect otherwise.
Yeah, I think that people kind of latched onto this team a little bit after the run in the Big Ten tournament, which was surprising, and then also this run, because sometimes there's that assumption that this team will continue on in the tournament, and I think there wasn't that assumption with this team this year, and so I think some people were a little more tempted to travel to Syracuse than maybe would have been tempted to travel to regionals in previous years, where maybe they were waiting for the Final Four or something along those lines. So yeah.
Now
cool.
The other guy who carried MSU, Denzel Valentine, 18 points, took 17 shots, 11 three-pointers, but did have 7 total rebounds, 3 offensive rebounds, no turnovers and assists. I thought early in the game, you were about halfway through the first half, and he looked gassed. He was chasing Buddy Hield around, and he had his hands on his shorts. He was huffing, and he was taking bad shots and missing, and he just felt like he was gassed. And then he had a three-pointer when MSU was down 10. I think MSU was down 10. He hit a three-pointer. And from that point, it was huge for him. It was huge for MSU. I think it made it 18-11. It might have been the one. And from that point on, he seemed to really be locked in after that point. Another solid, not a super efficient game from him, but after the slow start, he might have started like 1 for 6 or something like that. But he became huge. He's he's a big confidence boost for them because whenever he makes a shot, gets a big play, he's kind of that emotion that Trice doesn't always show. Your thoughts on the kind of game he had?
Well, I liked that in situations where the rebounding was sometimes not there, he was making some effort plays as well. There was a a couple different times on the offensive end where he was able to save a ball that was going out of bounds, or at least act as though the ball hadn't gone off of him, and got the call. And I thought those were big. I mean, he saved some possessions that way. And I mean, that's sort of totally apart from his ability to create offensively, which is also huge. Some of the shots that he took, I thought most of his shot selection was quite good. The shots weren't falling early for him. It got a little chippy at one point early in the second half. I don't even know exactly what happened there. I just know that they stopped play for a second, and there was sort of a congregation of Oklahoma and MSU guys near the top of the key. But after that, it did seem like the intensity kind of ratcheted up. I don't know if that was just something that came out of the locker room necessarily, or if they just decided that they needed to take some offense to something in order to get them riled up. But it worked one way or another, and it did seem like he was sort of the key in terms of the intensity level being up in that second half.
I don't know if I mentioned it already or not, but that puts MSU at Izzo at 12-9 as the lower seed, with the 12 wins being an NCAA tournament record according to ESPN, and they will be the lower seed once again as they play Louisville on Sunday at 2:20. Which, holy cow, what a turnaround! You're talking 36. That's 38 hours from now.
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, and that's what MSU had to go through a similar deal last year. Except for I feel like that might have been a 9-4 rather than a 10-2. I don't totally remember, but I think that was an underrated thing when people look at MSU maybe running out of gas a little bit down the stretch there last year. And this team has certainly been going on fumes at times, and with the length that Louisville has, I mentioned Nairn is a guy who should be rested, although he's been sick, but I don't know how much he'll play against a tall team like Louisville. Did you watch any of the NC State game? Louisville beat NC State by 10. It was a game that was within about 5 points almost the whole way until the end. They are a big team, number 34 in effective height. They rely on their defense, number 5 in adjusted efficiency. They press, they force turnovers. Offensively, it's been a bit of a struggle. They're only number 217 in effective field goal percentage. They miss free throws like MSU does. They block a lot of shots. Your initial thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't get to watch much of the NC State-Louisville game, unfortunately. But I mean, it seems like a pretty straightforward Louisville team. What's really interesting is that with having played Louisville and Virginia and Oklahoma, that means that in 3 consecutive games, MSU will have played 3 of the top 6 defensive teams in terms of defensive efficiency, which is kind of amazing. And the fact that they were able to put up the efficiency numbers that they were against both Virginia and Oklahoma bodes well for this team against Louisville. And considering also that basically the different styles that those games took on suggests that there's a lot of ability for this team to sort of evolve and play different types of games. I think I'm thinking back to the 2009 game where Louisville was the number 1 overall seed in the tournament, and MSU came in after a hard-fought late game against Kansas on Friday night, and then had to play Louisville, and basically nobody gave them a shot. And that's a much different MSU team. That MSU team, I think, had a lot more quality and a lot more depth. But
there's 2 ways to look at it. There's that Louisville game, and then there's the Louisville game in 2012 when MSU was the 1 seed and laid a complete egg offensively and got somewhat embarrassed by, I think, might have been a 4 seed Louisville in 2012 out in Arizona. And with the type of defense the Louisville team has, different ways it could go. What were you saying?
Yeah, I mean, the difference here is just that it's the second game in the weekend, right?
That's true.
And I think that has something to do with it. I also think that Louisville was sort of figuring themselves out, considering that Louisville, after beating MSU, had a little bit of a tournament run there, and then also won the national title the next year. Yeah. So I think that Louisville team had a little bit more quality in terms of the players on the squad, although that could be borne out differently, going forward in the future. But I do think that this MSU team is pretty well equipped with ball handlers to handle sort of the press, right? I think that between Tum Tum, Trice, Valentine, and even Bryn Forbes, who should be able to do some ball handling, and Alvin Ellis in short spurts has shown the ability to handle the ball a little bit. I'm pretty confident in that, and there's a good tweet from Heck Dorland. MSU's turnover percentage in the last 10 games has sort of, well, I could list off all the numbers, it wouldn't be really useful, but basically it's been really low. A lot of games under 10% turnover percentage, and historically this MSU team has been really good at rebounding, but has turned the ball over a lot, and it's sort of flipped, and that bodes well, because if you can take care of the ball against Louisville, then you're probably going to get some good looks at the rim.
Yeah, that's huge. You look at this pressing team. You've got Trice, Valentine, and Nairn, who can all play the point. Forbes, who's handled the ball pretty well. This will be an interesting game to see how Marvin Clark fits into this. Dawson, he's good at passing, not necessarily good at dribbling and passing, but he's good at passing. This is a game where we talk about it. We talked about at the beginning. MSU's been beaten up pretty good on the boards in 3 straight games in this tournament, and that's I don't know if that's something you're going to want to. That's something I don't know if you can afford against this Louisville team that struggles on offense to shoot the ball. You gotta let them. It's got to be one chance and done. And Costello and Schilling, and Dawson played well today, but Costello, Schilling, and Dawson are going to be just absolutely vital in this, especially on the defensive glass. I mentioned that stat earlier: 0 defensive rebounds between Schilling, Costello, and Wallenman today. And someone asked at the top of the thread, who do you think it's matched up with Montrezl Harrell, the 6'8" forward for Louisville? He jumps out of the gym. He's a good rebounder, physical guy. What's he at the free throw line? 60% at the free throw line, not great. But if this is a game when Colby Wallenman's going to see time, I think that's going to be really, really bad news for MSU. I think you've got to put Clark ahead of Wallenman at the center spot. I don't know. What do you think about Harrell and kind of the big man matchup?
Yeah, it seems to me like Dawson is the obvious answer, right? He's he's one of the few guys who can probably you can have an argument about athleticism between those two guys, and that'll be a really interesting matchup. I don't know. It's going to be and then also Marvin Clark. That'll be a really interesting one as well, because Marvin Clark, we talked about before the season. He set the freshman record for bench presses and all this stuff. So he does seem like he probably has the athleticism to hang in there a little bit as well. One thing that's interesting now that I'm sort of perusing the Louisville page is that Louisville has in this tournament not been, and actually in the ACC tournament, has not been phenomenal defensively. They didn't give up, they've given up under 1 point per possession, but not much under 1 point per possession to UC Irvine, Northern Iowa, and then actually a little more than 1 point per possession to NC State. So their defense hasn't been, incredibly efficient. It's actually been their offense that has been a little better, and that's pretty interesting. I expect that with no Chris Jones, that will be a little bit easier to handle. But yeah, Harrell be an interesting guy. I do think that it's almost like we almost have the perfect dude for him, though, which is Dawson.
You think so? And that's fouls are always important with this team. Louisville is number 130 at getting to the free throw line, which isn't great. But Harrell, Jones, and Rozier they all draw about 5 fouls per game between them. I think Terry Rozier is the guy. He's the guy who kind of stirs the drink for them offensively. 6'1" guard. I don't know if he's their point guard, but he had a really good game against NC State. Leads them offensively. Something I'll say about Louisville's defense today: NC State hit a number of three-pointers. I think they were something about almost 50% on threes. NC State was, and they're something like a 20-something% three-point shooting team. So that did play a little bit of a factor in it. But I'm looking at Twitter right now. Izzo asked where this ranks up in his most surprising or impressive tournament runs. He said first, and then said maybe I shouldn't say that. Might be backtracking, but it's not done yet. So one more victory would be one of the more sweeter moments of my career. And as we just kind of look at the big picture here, you think back to 2010, they got back to the Final Four looking to avenge the tournament loss, the national championship loss, and they were in a good spot to make the Final Four, maybe win the national championship. Came up short this year. They missed out on the Final Four last year and that streak. They're right back in this position again. It's still just remarkable to think that this team made the Elite Eight. I remember we said entering the tournament, or entering the Big Ten tournament maybe, I thought the ceiling for this team was Sweet 16, and then you saw the matchup with the 7th seed, and was like, well, if they made it to Sweet 16, you might as well make the Elite Eight. If you will make the Elite Eight, you might as well try to make the Final Four. What a turnaround. I mean, we've said it for about a month now, but this team has been playing its best ball ever since they hit, the Purdue game on senior night. How remarkable of a – I don't want to say turnaround, because it's not like this team was necessarily playing bad ball, but they were just playing inconsistent ball, and they've just been every game they've played about as well as they could, other than at the free throw line.
Yeah, I would say so. There is a weird phenomenon in sports generally, I think, where teams just sort of gain this momentum and they just play way over their heads over the course of some part of the season. I think the quintessential example is basically the 2013 football team, where the first 2 games of the season were games where they could barely score on offense at all, and that team ended up winning the Rose Bowl. And this isn't quite there yet. It's unbelievable, but and expectation shattering, but at the same time is maybe a half step below. I would say that there were another interesting one, although I'm not a huge baseball fan, but the 2006 Tigers, who the Tigers have been bad for a few years there, and they ended up making it all the way to the World Series, was another one of those where a team just kind of came together and shattered all expectations that the fan base had for them, and it just becomes a lot of fun. I mean, it's sort of, this is why we're sports fans to some degree, right? This is what it is that makes this fun. Yeah, I mean, when you say that they weren't playing bad ball, I mean, you can point at that Texas Southern loss and say that they were, right?
Oh, yeah, right. I mean, that was a bad. They never really, they kept for this probably the second half after the Illinois loss. After that, they kind of floated around there around the number 20 spot in KenPom. And even after they lose to Minnesota, they didn't fall down because they were so bad in luck, because they were so bad in free throw shooting, and they kept losing so many games late that KenPom was looking at them. His system was looking at them and saying, okay, well, they're just missing free throws, and that's costing them these games. But overall, their efficiency numbers have been good, and that's why MSU kind of stayed right there. So that's why I know Drew Hallett from Maizen Brew notes that the idea that MSU's playing its best isn't necessarily true, because they've been kind of at the same spot in KenPom. That's why I was saying they've been consistent. They've been making the plays.
Right.
They made the free throws at the end against Georgia to win that game. They made the free throws against Oklahoma tonight to win the game. And I think it's just the consistency is when we say playing their best, I think we mean simply playing consistent, which was a problem all year. So many ups and downs. You lose to Texas Southern. You almost beat Notre Dame. You take Notre Dame to overtime. So it was really up and down, and it's just been steadily up. And their top up may not be as high as some other ups, but simply staying at the up was huge for this team.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's basically as exciting as you could hope for, right? And basically another coin flip game against Louisville.
It's like 50% in Ken Palm, 1 point MSU wins. So.
And in 538 has us as 58% favorites. I think that has to do with travel distance and also preseason ranking to some degree. Although that's got to actually be a little bit wrong. I think Louisville was definitely rated more highly than us preseason. But yeah, that's to not be huge underdogs to make the Final Four. I can't even utter the sentence without just like not feeling like it's
like this, right. This ain't last year when Obama and every single person was picking MSU to win the national championship, to get to the Final Four, and they were a number 4 seed. But everybody, you kind of. Although I thought that was a little bit unfair. I still think last year's win over Virginia will never get the credit it's due in MSU basketball history, just because of what happened the next day against UConn. Or 2 days later against UConn.
And also the expectations in March, right? It's like if you're an MSU basketball fan and you don't make the Final Four, it's like, okay, whatever. Like it's like, oh, you made the Elite Eight, great. Like that's disappointing for me, right? Like,
right.
That's
someone noted on the OU, WAW noted, said on the OU site, quote, everyone says Izzo is such a great coach, but what I saw tonight was a team who hit threes and nothing else. Louisville will kill Sparty. I don't know about that last part, but they're not wrong about the offense. The offense was pretty much in the second half. It was 3-pointers and get the ball into Dawson and have him shoot pretty much. And given Oklahoma's size, that was kind of the game plan they had to go with, and it worked. Offensively, final numbers weren't great, but if you take away the slow start, they're at least respectable. And not to mention, Oklahoma, again, was the number 6 defense in the country. You got to give them a little bit of credit, too.
Yeah, what I saw was a coach a team to 1.15 points per possession.
Play to their strengths, too.
Against a top 10 defense in terms of defensive efficiency. And if that's allowing guys to just, come off of a ball screen and shoot threes, and that's your most effective offense, like there's nothing wrong with that. Like it's a little bit of an odd stylistic choice, but if you've been watching MSU all season, you know that had to be a big part of the strategy. So I don't know. I thought it was a terrific coaching job, but I'm probably taking that.
It's been a tremendous coaching job, and if they would make free throws, it would be even a more impressive coaching job, maybe. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they're not shooting bad in this half or in this tournament. They're shooting like atrocious. What did they finish? They finished 9 for 16, and just as they did in the Georgia game, they had to make all their free throws late to, I think, get over the 50% mark. If you take out the last maybe 2 minutes of games, MSU, I got to be shooting something like 30-40% free throws. It's really, really bad. If you were just bad, this MSU would have led by 2 scores for much of that second half. But it's atrocious. And Oklahoma went 14 for 16 at the line, and you keep thinking one of these games is Brad free throw shooting going to cost him in the end. Louisville is not a good free throw shooting team, so it may come down to which team is worse on the line. I guess we've been kind of talking here for a little bit. So as we kind of wrap this up, your pick for Sunday and your keys to the game.
Yeah, that's I hadn't prepared very well for this, but I think it's gonna be it's tough to say too, because Louisville was able to sort of get bullied into a slower-paced game as well in this tournament against Northern Iowa, which is a particularly slow team. I think that MSU will be well prepared for Sunday, just because that's what Izzo does, and I like MSU just because of the versatility and the way that guys have played. I think if the turnover percentage can stay low, that'll be the biggest key. In both stopping Louisville off, on defense too, because keeping the turnover percentage low will stop transition opportunities for them. So that's that to me is the biggest key is turnovers, and I think MSU wins again a close one.
Yeah, you
probably.
did call this one coming down to maybe the final possession, and it pretty much did. So you were right on that one.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. I take MSU. Let's say 68-64.
Yeah, that sounds. I'll go. I'll go 59-58 MSU. My biggest key is going to be defensive rebounding. We've talked about it throughout this podcast. It's been killing them in this tournament. It's pretty crazy that atrocious free throw shooting and very poor defensive rebounding, and yet here they are, one win from the Final Four. Just imagine if they actually put that together and had a game where they hit their free throws and made defensive rebounds. That's my biggest key: defensive rebounds. Cannot let Louisville get multiple looks at the basket, especially easy looks. Oklahoma had a number of easy putback layups in this one.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, it's hard to imagine MSU going through an entire tournament getting out rebounded in every game. So yeah, that's a good one too.
I mentioned this a couple days ago when MSU was picked as the favorite in the region as the 7 seed, and I said, are we at the point? And we talked about, are we at the point where it's a disappointment if MSU doesn't reach the Final Four? It is all this national love for Izzo and everything. And I said MSU fans hate when they get picked. The only thing MSU fans hate more than getting picked against is getting picked to win. I actually think with Louisville, I'm kind of curious. I think the national media picks I bet you they'll probably go 50-50. A lot of people respect Louisville and Pitino as they should for what they've done. It's a very Italian final game here, which means a lot to me. So I guess that's going to wrap it up here. Next time we talk to you, we'll do another post-game show. I'll say that. We'll do a post-game show Sunday. We'll get it done before WrestleMania starts, too. Win or lose, MSU is once again 1 game away from the Final Four. Haven't reached the Final Four since 2010. We'll be playing Louisville at 2:20 on PBS on Sunday for the chance to go to Indianapolis. So for Joe, I want to thank everybody for listening, and we will talk to you guys later. Enjoy the weekend. See ya.
See ya.